there are very few talks and entrepreneurs who have touched me as much as Scott Harrison, who is coming, because he's genuinely changing the world. And I keep thinking about what he does pretty much all the time. It's so inspiring. He will make what you do today questionable. Scott?
I think I'm supposed to stand over here. How is everybody? It's good to be back in Paris. The last time I was here, I was incredibly sick. I'd come from the Central African Republic, where I'd eaten caterpillars in the jungle, and it didn't agree with me. So I spent my whole time in Paris in a hotel room, and it's much, much nicer to... the weather was beautiful, too, so it was killing me to be indoors. I'm so excited to get to share my story with you. Over the next, I guess, about 40 minutes, I'm going to take you through a little bit of how I got into Charity Water. I'm going to talk about the water crisis, and I'm going to talk about Charity Water and what we've done over the last 6 years. And it's a lot of photos, and I hate being bored, so I promise I will try not to bore any of you guys. So a little bit about me. This was me as a kid. I was kind of the perfect kid. My parents cut my hair with a bowl, an actual bowl. And when I was about this age, when I was 4 years old, a tragedy happened in my family, and my mom became very, very ill. There was a carbon monoxide gas leak in our house, and she was poisoned by the carbon monoxide. And she became an invalid almost immediately. And for my whole childhood, I grew up watching my mom, who was amazingly healthy and was a journalist, become just a shell of what she used to be. And I took care of her. I did all the right things. I said all the right things. My parents were conservative Christians, so I grew up in the church and played by the rules. And then at 18 years old, I decided, like so many bad cliches, that I would do something very different. I would rebel. And all of the rules, all the things I wasn't allowed to do, I was going to now do. So I grew my hair down to my shoulders. I joined a band. I started smoking weed and drinking, and started to break all the rules. Now, the band immediately broke up, but I learned that the guys that were booking our band out were making way more money than we were. And I learned that there was this job in New York City called a nightclub promoter. And if you could fill up clubs with beautiful people, you could get paid lots of money to do that. And people would even pay $500 to drink a bottle of vodka that cost $20. So for the next 10 years, this became my life. Walking completely away from any sort of traditional conservative background. And at 28 years old, after a decade in the business, this was a snapshot of my life, getting paid $2,000 a month just to drink Bacardi in public, and another $2,000 a month just to drink Budweiser in public. So I thought I was the man. I choose this photo because it shows what an idiot I was. I am holding out the Rolex watch so that the photographer notices that I have an expensive watch. Now, it might have looked glamorous to my friends on the outside, but it wasn't very glamorous. This is a snapshot of me around 5 or 6 in the morning. And it was a very dark, dark life. And I, on a trip to South America, finally came to my senses and realized that I was the most spiritually, emotionally, morally bankrupt person that I knew, and I needed to make a change. Now, I was with all the right people. I was in Punta del Este, and I had everything I thought I wanted: the BMW, the beautiful dog, the beautiful girlfriend that was on billboards, the watch, the grand piano, and I was miserable. So I actually started rediscovering my faith, I think, in a different way as an adult. It wasn't shoved down my throat anymore. And I decided that I would try to live it out with integrity and leave everything behind and go serve the poor. Now, I thought this would be easy, so I started applying to all these humanitarian organizations. But to my surprise, I am denied by every organization I tried to volunteer for. They said, what is a nightclub promoter? Like, how would you be useful to our mission in Uganda or our mission in Sudan? Finally, and thankfully for me, later that year in the fall of 2004, an organization called Mercy Ship said, if you pay us $500 a month, you can volunteer. So I thought, all right, here's my credit card. And I said, where are you guys going? And they said, well, we're going to a country called Liberia. Now, at the time, I thought Africa was a single country. Didn't realize that Liberia was one of many. and said, sure, I'm in. What do I have to do? And I'd applied to be their volunteer photographer and take pictures of everything that happened on this humanitarian mission. So I learned that I was going to be joining a hospital ship, and this became my new home for the next year. Big apartment in New York, traded for a couple hundred square feet around the waterline with two strange roommates that worked in the engine room and a bunch of cockroaches. And I started feeling sorry for myself immediately until I left the ship and saw how people were living in Liberia. And after the 14-year Civil War, Charles Taylor decimated this place. There was no electricity, there was no running water, there was no sewage, there was no mail. People were living in bombed-out apartment buildings, in houses in ruins. I learned that if you got sick in Liberia, you were in real trouble. And what our organization was doing was bringing doctors to people who needed access to medical care. So before the ship sailed in, an advance team would put up these posters everywhere. And they'd say, if you've got a huge tumor, if you've got a piece missing from your face, flesh-eating disease, if you've got a cleft lip or a cleft palate, turn up, and maybe our doctors can help you for free. So I was so excited about this. You know, my third day there, I grabbed my camera. We're rolling up to the stadium at 5:30 in the morning to see who turned up, who we could help. And I knew we had 1,500 surgery slots. 7,000 people came. And I remember taking this picture through tears as I knew 5,000 people were going to be turned away, and some of them had walked a month. In Liberia, there was one doctor for every 50,000 people in the country. In our world, there's one for about 200. First kid in line shocked me. It's this boy, Alfred, and he was 14, and he had a benign tumor, and he was suffocating to death on his own face. And I remember meeting him and just losing it. I just started weeping. I ran in the corner of the stadium saying, I want to go back home. I don't think I can handle this. And the chief medical officer came up to me and said, look, kid, you signed up to do this. This is what our organization has done for 25 years. Toughen up. You've got 2 days, and you're going to meet 150, 200 people, just like Alfred, with conditions this severe. So I pulled it together, and then he invited me into Alfred's surgery a couple days later, and I saw what was happening on the ship and what I had signed up for. In a few-hour surgery, volunteer doctors took out the tumor, and then they said, why don't you take Alfred home with his new face? Why don't you take him back to his village? And it was an incredible, incredible moment. Watching Alfred received back in, hundreds of people dancing and celebrating and watching him heal. And this is what life was like. I would wake up and I'd meet a woman named Marthaline and learn that for 10 years she'd had a towel in her hand because when she walked out of her hut, people would throw rocks at her. They thought she was cursed. What she needed was a 45-minute surgery that she just couldn't afford, and got a brand new face back. So the first year, I took about 50,000 photos. I met some of the most incredible people. I signed up for another year, and on that second tour, I started learning what was making some of the people sick. It was dirty water. Now, thankfully for me, Mercy Ships had given a little bit of money to a guy off to the side, and he was working in the villages helping people get clean water. So because I had to photograph everything, I jumped in Land Rovers with him and said, show me what you're doing. And he showed me the sources that people were drinking from, and they were ponds and swamps and rivers. I remember saying to him, Leif, no wonder things are growing on people's faces. I wouldn't step in that water. I wouldn't let my dog drink that water. And entire communities, it was all that they had. So what he would do is he would work with the locals. He would train them how to tap into the clean groundwater that was often 10 meters, 15 meters beneath the swamp. And then he would take me back a couple months later, and I could drink the clean water in the village. And while we were doing these impactful surgeries and saving lives, this guy off to the side was touching thousands of people for a fraction of the cost, and that left a deep impression